Do you know, in our businesses, we tend to work in isolation. We view others in our industry sometimes as competitors to be feared and guarded against, not to give away that ounce of information. However, when we work individually, and as individual companies, we have no power, we have no leverage, we have little or no say in our country's policies. I think it's fair to say, actually, in most national governments, and in fact in the general public, employee relocation is a dark art. It's a mystic thing that people know little about. And I'm sure all of you have gone to, I don't know, a dinner party or an event or something, and somebody says, "What do you do?" "Well, I'm in employee relocation." "Oh, what does that mean?" Governments are no different. Relocation industry doesn't yet register on their radar. But let me give you a couple of facts just about the UK, because I know about that a little more. Our UK Association has done a very straw poll. We think that there is a gross domestic product of £7 billion a year in employee relocation. 7 billion. That's, for those, in case there's some Americans here, it's 7 followed by 9 zeros. The income generated by the relocation of our clients is across sectors as diverse as visas and pensions, medical, health, real estate, removals, furniture, interim accommodation, you know the list. But interestingly, we believe in the UK that in indirect spending that's created by relocation, so that's on rents and salaries and school fees and all of those other ancillary costs, it's £21 billion in the UK. 21 billion. And we aren't really recognised by our government. Shocking, really, when you consider that the UK defence budget in 2021-22 was 45 billion. Put it into context. At the top level, we have, as we were seeing this morning with the panel that we're here, Euro and CRC and WERC and IAM and FEDE and CHPA, a group of people who are an umbrella organisation. They bring us all together under those specific sectors. And they're great umbrellas. But if you consider an umbrella for a moment, it's made up of lots of panels. And they were talking about work groups in terms of sustainability. But those panels that make up that umbrella actually should be our national associations, because they are formed to fill a gap that identifies collective voice for our specific countries. For good governance, national government policies, not even Euro policy, are built or influenced by one single organisation alone, but through associations. Associations coordinate a sector, represent the collective interests of all the members in that industry. They're advocates for that sector. And they offer insights and knowledge and experience to policymakers, but only if you're listened to. National associations exist to serve the needs of members and play a leading role in addressing issues that impact their sector. Earlier today, we were also listening to them setting standards in sustainability. But you have to set standards in your national environment as well, so that government understands the language that you speak. We're going to hear now from a panel of experts who represent their associations. They've all come together, and I'm very, very grateful to them to do so, because some of their associations have been around for a very long time that we will hear, and some are brand new. We want to hear from them in this conversation that we're going to have to understand what their associations are doing and how they're doing it and how many members are involved And for those of you who don't have an association, we'd like you to go away and think about how you might be able to get one and pull one together. So, this morning we have with us Anita Meyer, who represents ABRA in Belgium. Anita. Hannah Zentgraf, thank you. Hannah Zentgraf, who represents ARP in Germany. Jeremy Bateau from FAR and MG in France. And Jeremy very kindly has said he's going to tell you what that stands for because I can't pronounce it.
It stands for Fédération des acteurs de la relocation et de la mobilité géographique. Sorry about it.
Yeah, whatever you said. And Simon Johnston from the Association of Relocation Professionals. Let me come to Simon. I believe the ARP is probably the oldest of the associations, not least of which that it was founded by Tad. So, Simon, tell us about the ARP. You were the chair for the last 3 years during the COVID.
Correct, yes. So you're absolutely correct. It goes back to 1986. So Tad was originally involved in it, but he didn't technically start it. So I had to check with Tad on this to make sure I got all my dating right. And actually, it was in 1988 that he then took over the ARP, and then it became sort of a nucleus, if you like, to what we have today.
Right.
And you could argue was maybe part of the journey towards Europe. So at the moment, the ARP has just over 100 different members, and they're across all the disciplines. It really doesn't matter what you do, as long as you're involved in the relocation journey. So the DSPs are in there, removals in there, language training companies in there. Everybody's in there and hugely welcome. Now, as far as why we exist, I would personally boil this down to sort of two key issues, and I'll then expand onto a third. And that's really firstly around training. So there was a lot of requirement within the UK for particular training that wasn't really being identified by any other means. So if I can bring this up to date, and this is where some of the people in this room have been so strong on this, things like anti-money laundering training, you've got the legal training in regard to rental contracts. These are complex minefields which the government throws out there and then gives absolutely no advice to whatsoever at how you're supposed to actually manage it. So that was, I think, the sort of key issue. The second bit was really around collaboration. It's just amazing to bring everybody together and actually share and address common problems. So on the back of that, we have two major events we have every year. One is the Christmas party, which I would challenge is probably the best Christmas party you could probably go to. It is an event and a half, so if you ever want to come to the UK, come to our Christmas party. And that sounds all quite light-hearted, but you have 150 plus people there, and it's just an amazing network occasion. And the other one is we have an award ceremony, which is usually around early summer. And again, I think this really matters. The ARP awards are really focused on companies who not only are sort of international like ourselves, but companies who are focused on into UK or within UK. So this gives a vehicle for the smaller businesses, like the property finder companies, who don't get a chance to have that high visibility, to put themselves forward for the awards and get that high profile as a result. So that's sort of the backbone of it. I think what's really happened in the last, I suppose, 3-4 years is recognizing that, as you alluded to earlier, the government has no idea we exist. And if you permit me, there are just these two examples I'd like to explore. Firstly is, there is similar to yourself, there is a tax regime that was introduced about 30 years ago, where the first £8,000 of somebody's tax relief can be exempt from tax. And that sounds lovely. And 30 years ago, £8,000 made perfect sense. Now, move on 30 years, it's nowhere. So we've got to get the government to recognise that it's in their interest to revisit that and why it's in their interest. The other one, actually, was really interesting, what you're talking about, is the fact that the government is recognising that the real estate agents in the UK are perhaps not as governed as well as they could be. So there is a new wave of legislation coming in. And here's the problem. The government doesn't see any difference between a real estate agent and a relocation company. So if we do not get our profile increased, as a government recognise who we are and what we stand for, we are seeing problems coming down the road. So we've been putting a lot of energy into regard to lobbying and building up that profile. So we're right at the foothills of this, but we've got some exciting things going on.
Fascinating, isn't it? Because when we started this conversation, Anita, that's your motivation was actually we don't want to be lumped in with real estate agents or estate agents in any way whatsoever.
Okay, well, this is a long, slow journey. Basically, anything to do with UK government does not happen quickly, as we have now transpired. But let me sort of sum it up. The big difference was a while ago, we got to work with an ex-MP, who is a fabulous guy. He's a lobbyist. He's an expat himself. He's travelled around the world, so he understood the industry. So we then had to spend a lot of time with him trying to explain exactly what we're trying to do, what the issues are. But this has been a catalyst to the change, but it has taken time. So the end result now, let's just warp it up to where we are, because it's quite an exciting moment if we can keep this going. So we have now the ex-MP has now brought it in a sitting MP to actually become the head of the APPG, which is the all-party parliamentary group. So if you want to get government to recognise us, to engage with us and discuss with us, or questions to be raised, you need an APPG, which is not the easiest thing to do, but we've now got one. So we now have a sitting MP who is now working with his team to try and get some of the key questions we have raised. Now, the exciting thing is we have a meeting coming up fairly shortly. We just got to this catalyst. So our first APPG official meeting will be taking place very soon, but that will be taking place in the House of Parliament in Westminster, which again is an amazing opportunity. So for the first time, our voice, our recognition is being brought in. But we had a few sort of hiccups along the way, because we thought one of the best ways to do this was to actually tackle the Mayor of London. So that's not an easy task, to try and get a meeting with Sadiq Khan, but we've got one. So we had a chance to express to him how amazing it is, the relocation industry. And just to put the perspective, the numbers you gave are, for the UK are correct. But let's be honest, South East England and London is the beneficiary of this. So we're going in there and actually saying that this is an issue worth billions to the London economy. And he went, oh, that's fascinating, and then kind of moved on. So you have to sort of find hooks to really get them back in again. So we're hoping to have further meetings with other mayors around the country. We've got this APP taking place very shortly. We now have the ability, if that goes well, which is looking very promising, to get questions raised to government. We can then start raising some of these issues we talked about the 8,000, and also about the legislation for estate agents and letting agents. And hopefully, there is a possibility we can get our questions raised in the House of Commons. So I don't know if anybody knows how the UK system works on politics, but really what you want is somebody in the House to stand up to ask the Prime Minister or a official body a key question. If we can get to that stage, you're now on the radar. So once we get to that position, and this is where I don't want to go into the whole Brexit thing, whether you think it's good or bad, the opportunity for us on the back of this is very good. What do I mean by this? Well, the government is going off and trying to do trade agreements with the world at the moment. Well, they're doing this and going, isn't this amazing? The Britain is a fantastic place to do business. You should come on over with your money. And we go, yes, what about the people? You might want to think about them. So all that talent that's coming around the world, coming to the UK, you need us there. So we're trying to see if we can get the government to recognise that as you're doing these envoys and events around the world to promote the UK and to try and win more business and build on these trade agreements, this industry is right at the heart of it. And that is our ambition. So we're, as I said, we're at the foothills of it, but it's beginning to come together.
It is interesting.